So hi and welcome to another review, and today we're checking out the Bolt Wireless from Fnatic. It's been sent to me to take a look at, and today we're going to go through some pros and cons, latency tests, sensor deviation, sensor location, full dimensions, comparison on the Zowie S2 shape as well, to give you an idea where this mouse is for you. Let's start off with the pros. While this shape is extremely close to the S2 as we said, we'll go through these in a bit more detail, but for people who are looking for a Zowie S2 wireless, which doesn't exist at the minute, then the Bolt Wireless is certainly a mouse you need to go and check out. This mouse has got a nice coating, it's got a slight texture to it, certainly offers a bit more grip over something like the G Pro Wireless, and it's certainly going to allow you to get hold of it a little bit better without any grip tape. It's also got some big feet spanning across the entire mouse, which I do like. The only concern I have is that the feet themselves are not fully rounded, especially on the rear skate. The front one is rounded on the rear of the front, but not on the front. So to me, that's going to catch a little bit. Would have been nice to see them all round. The build quality on this is good. No rattles, no flex, no creaks. Well built. Nice job. It's nice to see they're using KL8s as the main switches in this. The scroll wheel's got some RGB as well as a decent width. The size there is a little bit of an issue. It's also rocking connectivity for 3 options here. You've got Bluetooth, cable, and 2.4 wireless, which is nice to see. Rocking USB-C, great. It's also got some software. Whoop, whoop. So it's got the PAW3370 sensor in it, but it's not all good. So here's some of the cons before we get into some of the latency tests and sensor deviation, which I'm sure most people will be interested in. Some of the cons, while the main buttons are certainly narrow, you're coming at only 20mm mains. I'll show you that in a bit. So they are quite narrow if you've got pretty sausage fingers like myself. There's also a lot of pre and post travel in the mains. Check this out. This means the KL8s feel mushy compared to other mice like the Model O Minus or any of the other options, something like the XM1R. Not as snappy because of this button. I don't know whether because it's too thin when we tore it down in the Twitch stream that I did. We're only weighing about 2 grams, which is quite thin. Or whether that maybe adds a little bit of flex to it. Or whether there's something just different in the pre and post travel making these feel not quite as clicky as they should. The side buttons as well are also cheap as chips. It's using the Alexa switch on the side, which a lot of mice companies seem to be using at the minute, and please stop using these switches. They are horrible. People want real switches, so make sure you don't put these in any mice, because this is definitely a bad point. The scroll wheel diameter is also very small in this mouse, making it pretty hard to get. If you're reaching forward, you've got to be pretty precise with it. Doesn't really cause me a problem, but it would do some people. It's also running an Alps encoder, which can be a little bit aggressive and a little bit noisy. As we've already mentioned, the skates are not rounded on it, which is definitely a bit of a noob mistake. And the software, which is probably one of the most annoying things, it's got software which is great, but you have to plug it in to customize it. You can't do it with the wireless dongle, which is a bit of a problem. Go into a little bit more detail on what's involved in the software. That's just the pros and cons for people that just want to hit this review. GTFO. Now, let's get into a bit more detail. So we're back with some of the data which people will be happy with. I know I've been slacking on it, but here we go. So the clicks per second on this mouse are 6 clicks per second. That definitely confirms the mushiness and the long travel. A bit like the G Pro Wireless can suck, and it gives it a low CPS, which is not ideal. These should be a lot quicker for the KL8s. Latency, we've got a few different latency tests here. The first one is the human benchmark, a bit of a simple test here, not really accurate. It gives people an idea to compare to people like Rocket Jump Ninja's tests. An average of 162 milliseconds, which actually is pretty quick, puts it in second place. Nice. Moving on to a newer test that I'm doing using the NVIDIA Reflex latency. I've got built into a monitor here, using the 360Hz monitor from ROG with this capability. And this comes in with an average of 134 milliseconds, which is pretty good. It's in the middle of 2 known mice, being the Model O Minus, which is the fastest at the minute, and the G Pro X. The other test we're doing here, which is done a lot of mice with, is the blood PK, so the left latency. Came in at 161 milliseconds, which puts you in the middle of the pack. The right button on this latency comes in 183 milliseconds, which puts it really at the back, which is a bit of a shame here. And then that gives it an average of 172 milliseconds, with the right click here is dragging it down. This gives a bit more of an accurate measurement with the NVIDIA Reflex and the blood PK, for my opinion, for what this latency, this mouse really is. So taking a look at the sensor deviation on this mouse, and what that means is it a true 400 dpi, 800 dpi, 1600 dpi? Allows you to adjust your sensitivity to compensate for it. At 400 dpi, the average came in at 408, which means it's got a deviation of 1.9%. At 800 dpi, the average came in at 825 dpi. This gives it a deviation of 3.1%. This is the largest deviation. And at 1600 DPI, it came with an average of 1610 DPI, which is a deviation of 0.006%, meaning it's just under 1%. So overall, not a massive issue for the DPI here, pretty standard. The only one is around 800, you're going to have to tweak sensitivity a little bit more potentially compared to some sensors like the Hero. So this is what it's like compared to the S2. I've only got the shell here. Gives you a good idea of how close these are. You'll be surprised how close they are. The only real differences here you can see as we look at this is on the front. The front is slightly different in terms of its angle. It's slightly more angled on the S2 compared to the Bolt Wireless here, but these are very, very close. So now we're moving on to the actual dimensions of this mouse, and the length comes in 121 millimeters. The width in the middle, this includes the button profile, is 58 millimeters. The middle at the bottom is 53 millimeters. The front width is 61 millimeters, and the rear is 63 millimeters. Height in the middle is 38 millimeters. The front is 21 millimeters. The button width, as we mentioned, is 20 millimeters on the left, and on the right, because it's an ambi mouse. The scroll wheel width is 7.8 millimeters. Like I said, it's quite a wide scroll wheel, which is good. The side button height on the front is 5.58 millimeters, and on the rear, 6.57 millimeters. And the side button length on the front is 17.54 millimeters, and on the rear, 16.59 millimeters. So sensor location, that's important to people. These are the measurements for that. The sensor is 56 millimeters from the front, 59 millimeters from the rear, 27 millimeters from the left, and 27 millimeters from the right. This means the sensor is slightly forwards by a couple of millimeters. The mouse comes in at 68 grams on the scales here, which is close enough to the 67 grams they say it will be. This is heavy for its size. I'd expect it to at least be 60 grams, given some of the other mice out there that are slightly larger, and given the trend at the moment is for lightweight mice. One of the things we did realize was in the teardown, you could take the label off the base. It comes in at 1.3 grams in weight. So there's definitely some ways to save some weight on this mouse. So for me, the weight class for this one is heavy for its size. So the software, as we've mentioned, definitely needs some work. I'm not sure if this is full release or beta, but for instance, you've got to plug the cable in to be able to change any settings on it. Lighting, DPI, polling rate, everything. The cable's got to be plugged in, which is a bit of a shame here. It does save it to the mouse, which means you can take it away to use it elsewhere, but you shouldn't have to plug the cable in. One of the other problems with the software is that you can't assign any buttons in it yet. So you can't assign the side buttons, say to 1 and 2 or G and 3 or whatever you want. And even with X mouse, I tried this on stream and I still couldn't get it to assign these buttons, which was a bit of a disappointment. One of the good points in this software though, and hopefully they make some amendments, is the LOD. You can change it from 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters. You can also change the debounce setting as well. Cable flex is okay if you have to put it on the cable, but I don't expect you to do too much of this because it's got the 470 milliamp battery that we found out in the teardown, although it does run the 3370, which can be a tad thirsty. Let me know how your battery is. If you've got this mouse, put it in the comments. The mouse does come in at $79, which definitely puts it up there with the other mice. Just a shame they're using the cheaper side buttons here, which I think lets it down, as some of the other mice at this range are using full switches that we're used to. They did send this mouse out to check out, so my review here is not biased though. So overall, what do I think? Well, I think this mouse has some potential. I think there's a few things need to iron out, pre and post travel, especially in the mains. That was my main concern, along with the software. But overall, if you're after a Zowie S2 wireless, you'll be used to the mushy pre-travel anyway, because Zowie has it anyway. And I think you should definitely check out this mouse if you want the wireless version. Hope you like this video. Good to see some of the data back. I'll certainly be continuing it and populating all the data that I'm missing at the moment, because I'm definitely missing some. And I'll catch you soon. See you later. Bye-bye.